Welcome to That Could Have Been an Email. I'm Leslie Bailey.
And I'm Ron Shaw.
And we started this podcast to discuss the good, bad, and ugly of project managing, bring humor to our everyday project management and client situations, and a place to commiserate on all those things that our partners, friends who aren't in the industry never understand. Hi, everybody. Welcome to That Could Have Been an Email. I'm Leslie Bailey. Along with me is the always festive, whatever holiday is happening, Ron Shaw. Hey, Ron, how's it going?
Hello, good. How are you?
Good. That tree looks brighter every time we do a podcast. It's making me
It's getting
happy.
closer to Christmas, so it'll just get brighter. It's a natural thing. It just happens.
Everybody can stop saying it's too early. We haven't even had Thanksgiving yet, and just get off that train because this place will be fully decorated as well once we start next week. So happy to have everybody here. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving if you celebrated. We're now fully into the holiday season. And with that comes the interesting topic of people going on vacation, covering for certain team members. And if you're always feeling like the person who's covering for everybody else because of your personal situation, whether you are single, you just started, you have a family, whatever situation that is, it always somehow seems to creep up into when people take vacations or are out. So along with us today, we have Fallon Cryer. Fallon is one of our colleagues. She's fully experienced in this entire topic and has wanted to join us to share stories and insights of how people can get away from being that default person, but also what leadership can do to not make those assumptions and not make people feel that they're going to be expected to be working during those holiday or vacation breaks. So welcome, Fallon.
Thanks, Leslie. Hi, Leslie. Hi, Ron. Thank you so much for having me. Long-time listener, first-time caller. So I'm very excited to be with you today.
Long-time listener. Fallon has been working with Ron and I for about 3 years, and we're happy that we got to have that experience with her, that we still have that experience with her. So let's jump right in because I feel like a lot of people are starting to feel that pressure. I know with holiday breaks, it's kind of assumed that people with families or even children are going to be the ones that take the most break, which in some situations that might be true. In others, it's not. And I think a lot of teams make those assumptions. So I was sharing with Fallon around before we started just a story of one of my friends who I had at a former organization who basically was the default vacation coverer, shall we say. That's not a word, but we'll use it today. When it came to holidays, because she lived in the same city as our headquarters. She never really traveled for holidays, and everybody else did. So she, like a trooper, would assume that position, and one time did have to work into the late hours of Christmas Eve. And kind of made it known after that it was a little bit unfair that just because she didn't travel, didn't have a whole huge family to go to, that she was the person who was on call, was there for everybody before this big conference that we would have. So while I'm going to make my pop culture reference of the episode, Joni Mitchell, both sides now, I've seen both of it. I've been the single person who was always available, always had that time, to now having a family, traveling all the time for holidays. So I do take some extra time with those days off. So Ron, I want to ask you first, what has your experience been like? Have you noticed that with some organizations, everybody pretty much has the same time off, or the single people or people with more time in air quotes are the ones that are around the most when those holidays kind of creep up on us?
I would say it's going to depend based on the position because across organizations, they do try to set up, here's your time off, but it depends on what type of role it is. And like in an instance of like a support or services industry, sometimes you have to have somebody that is that on-call or that on-call team, especially when it's around a product or software or something like that. You do have to have somebody available for those instances, or most of the time it's nice to, because you still have clients working from other areas that may not celebrate the same holidays or the time off. So really keeping that in mind. From my own perspective, where it's been is I'm normally the one who's the volunteer for those hours because I'm single. I don't have a family. I'm able to just kind of jump in and do that when I need to. So that's just kind of been a role I've always volunteered.
Yeah. And then Fallon, have you had both experiences as well? So before you had children and after, did you kind of get that feeling that before that you were asked or assumed to have that time. And then your other team members were kind of picking up if you had children activities or family activities to go to.
Absolutely. And I think that there's a lot of words that we've heard here. And the number one is assumptions.
Yep.
Okay. And assumptions are often fueled by people's biases, and we all have them. Anybody who says that they don't have them is just not in touch with themselves. But depending on where you are in your life, you may be able to more easily relate to somebody else. You may have a level of empathy, or the opposite is also true. Mm-hmm. And so right now, I think much of the world is going towards this working from home or more flexibility. But in an office environment, I know both of you worked in office environments for a long time, probably BC, before children for you, Leslie. And you might recognize that time when you were the one who was in the office, same for me, and other people were leaving at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon to go and pick up their children. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes you're in that moment, and when you can't relate, you might maybe get frustration, resentment, or something like that. But at the end of the day, frustration and resentment feelings, you know, if I have them, that's up to me. Mm-hmm. Right? Those are my feelings. Nobody's making me feel that way. And so thinking, well, why do I feel like that? I feel like that because maybe there isn't a clear sense of roles and responsibilities. Maybe a conversation hasn't happened. Maybe I've made an assumption or somebody else has. Mm-hmm. And so this is always going to happen. People always want to get their needs met. Right?
Yeah.
And for an organization, if the organization is the beast, we've got to feed the beast, right? And everyone's got to work together to get the business to achieve its targets. I think back to your friend who was the default person. Mm-hmm. And in your story, you told me something important. There was a moment in time where she was doing what Ron said that he does, which is he would volunteer. Mm-hmm. And that worked for him. He'd have that conversation, he'd have that contract, and that was great. And also for your friend, but she decided, and it's perfectly okay for her to do this, she decided that she wanted something to do something different. And then to signal that, she raised her hand and said, hey, this isn't for me anymore. And so she actually did the right thing. Now, she might have got frustrated, and that's what led to it. But ultimately, she said, okay, I've got to put a boundary in place. I'm going to signal that intention, and then let's have a conversation about it. Mm-hmm. What ended up happening with the friend? Did she get what she wanted, or did people just kind of step over it?
She did the next year because she was smart enough to take off those days way in advance. So she was out of the office. So I think in a way she figured out a plan for herself. Like, okay, I know everybody's going to take these days off, so I'm going to ask for it way in advance. That way I can't be that default person. And it did work out for her. She got a lot of time with her family at the holidays, but also we all kind of recognize that. And we're like, okay, well, I'm going to take off this morning just to travel. And then I will be on in the afternoon once I get to where I'm going. So I think I will say that I was, biased because I'm so used to traveling every year and just, I hate to say it this way, having a team deal with it, that I was going to be out traveling because I don't live around my family. So I think I came to the realization as well, especially when the Christmas Eve thing happened, that was just so sad and stressful because it's getting to like 5 p.m. on Christmas Eve and most people are going to family things, tradition services. And she's stuck trying to figure this out. And that I wouldn't want that to happen to me as well. So yes, the next year it did work out, but it was because her team became more aware of how unfair that was and just the expectation that there was at least one person around.
Yeah. So I think, just hearing this story, it's about the consideration of asking someone rather than always assuming someone's a default. It's having that conversation. If someone's willing to do that, great. But I don't think any organization should ever make the mistake of assuming, or a team should make the mistake of assuming that someone's a default just because of a situation. And Fallon, it kind of goes back to something that you were saying, thinking about the office years when we're watching those people leave at 2 or 3 because they're going to do kids. We don't necessarily know what's happened there, but also we may not have seen that they came into the office 2 or 3 hours earlier and they're working that time. All we tend to focus on a lot of the time is our time of what we're doing. And then we see that because we know we have to keep working. but they were actually there the 2 hours before or whatever, making up that same amount of time we're in there. It's just that visual perception we tend to get stuck in of our own reality of what's here versus the larger scope of what's going on.
It's so true.
Mhm.
And, there's all these old adages about assumptions. And if we are going to assume, we should really assume the best in people in these scenarios on both sides of the coin, right? If you
Mhm.
see something happening and you don't really understand it and it's generating some negative reactions or feelings for you, it's probably a signal that maybe if you are so inclined, dig into it a little bit more, test your assumptions. And also vice versa, if you feel like somebody's doing something to you, try and look at it with some fresh eyes and assume the best in them. Assume that maybe they're just ignorant or that they were trying to do the right thing. An example of sort of how assumptions can also negatively impact people, even though they're trying to be positive. And I know that Leslie and I have talked about this a lot. And it happens to, in particular, just the scenario I'm talking about, women who have recently had children.
Mhm.
If I had $1 for every time I've been in a leadership meeting and somebody has suggested that maybe the person who is fully qualified wouldn't be interested in traveling to do their job. That's their responsibilities, and maybe we should offer to have somebody else do it. Or maybe they're not interested in a promotion right now because they've just had a baby. Now, the intention behind that is often so positive. Coming out of my mouth, it doesn't sound like it is, but making the assumption is based on that person's own bias. For sure, some people, usually the person who's saying that, they wish that somebody had done that for them, but you never know what somebody else's preference is. So you have to ask them. You should ask them rather than making the assumption. And just because somebody's single, they weren't poured out of a test tube and don't have a belly button. These people do have families.
Mhm.
They may not have grown their own yet, but they came from somewhere. They have friends. They have a life. It is a very long bow to draw to
Mhm.
make an assumption that just because somebody isn't coupled with another human being and hasn't, grown a child or acquired one from a Tully's, that they don't have something to do. It doesn't even matter. Maybe they want to go training. Maybe they want to go to the gym, but they have their own life. And we owe it to everybody to get to know them a little bit more and to collectively distribute the work and have a conversation as a team to figure out how we're going to do it, and not just race
Mhm.
for who's got dibs and calling shotgun on holiday time, because that, in your friend's case, she's like, I put in
6 months ago. Yeah.
6 months ago. You can't change this. Because that can still lead to some resentment, because maybe you're disorganized and then you get there and the cupboard is bare and then you're left, you're the spare. So you've got no choice. There's many ways that it can play out, but there's also many ways you can avoid it, I think.
Well, there's also, it's interesting because when you look at both sides, this sounds like I'm always referencing the same person. I'm not. I'm referencing everybody I've ever worked with. I also knew someone, different person apart from this, who would take all these vacations during the year. It seemed like every other month. And I'd be like, oh my God, they never work. But in my head, I was like, God, I want to be on vacation. Like, that's what my feelings were. It wasn't that these people didn't work or didn't finish their work. They just took more vacations than I did. But then once I got to being pregnant and having a kid and how much I'll throw my personal info out there. They call me geriatric pregnancy, which nobody likes that term. And you have to go to the doctor like every other day. So I fully understood now where people be like, oh, they're always out. It's not that we want to be out. I don't want to be out going to the doctor every other day, but you just have to. And it's exactly what you said, Fallon. It's just your personal feelings about it are something with you. It's not what that person actually being out. You don't actually care that person is on vacation again. That doesn't affect you.
It's that frustration because you want to be doing something similar or something like you have something else on your mind that you want to be doing. And it's like, oh, they're here, I'm stuck here, they're out doing whatever, and you're imagining this whole glorious scenario with what's going on for them. In reality, they might be sitting at a doctor's office going, God help me, I would rather be at work right now.
Yeah, exactly. So Fallon's so right with it's some weird feeling you have, because I also told Fallon a story about another person I know, who a teammate of hers had just come back from maternity leave, and then the next week took a vacation day. And she thought that was ridiculous because she had just been on vacation. Newsflash, everybody, maternity leave is not a vacation. If it's not at all. So I think it's just those weird unresolved feelings we have about maybe we don't take as much vacation as we want to. So that's why we feel that way about that person who does. And feeling like you can never leave. I used to have that feeling a lot in a lot of my old positions where they would tell me I had 20 vacation days left that I never took. Because I just never felt like I could take vacation. And that was something with me. That was not with any of the companies. And Ron, I think you said that on our last episode that you always had vacation left over.
Yeah. I mean, it's that whole thing like I was talking about of unlimited time off. In reality, there is no, there's a better way to term it. I saw it this weekend. I wish I could recall it, but there was somebody actually had it labeled a better way other than unlimited time off, because unlimited time off means, great, I signed my contract with you and I might work an hour here or there. I've got unlimited time off. There's nothing that restricts it as long as the work's done, right?
Yeah. And yeah, go ahead.
But I think bigger picture here of what we're talking about, at least from my perspective, is that it's a lot of this is about perception and being curious enough to ask people really what's going on with them. So rather than just, making our assumptions and saying, this is how we're going to go, this is what they're doing, it's have that moment to go, what's really going on with them? What's happening with them? What's their life like? And just having a conversation versus getting huff and puffy and all worked up on something when we really don't know what's necessarily happening in their world.
Absolutely. And not to get too deep on it as well, but being aware of how your biases towards yourself. If you want other people to respect you and your boundaries, you need to respect yourself and your boundaries. How many times have we or listeners put a boundary in place and said maybe, hey, I'm not going to work this weekend because I've got something to do. But then somebody needs their needs met. And then we make a choice to step over our boundaries, but then we get angry at the other person. Unpopular opinion, this is not their fault. This was our fault because we weren't willing to accept the consequences that we'd made up in our mind around what would happen if we stayed firm in our boundaries. And this happens for a lot of people, especially people who are earlier in their career, coming up in the place. They have logically, these are not unfounded fears, but that they won't be perceived as a team player, that they won't be able to be successful, that they won't get opportunities, and that there will be a consequence if they don't do something. Okay. And it's very complex. And so they might make a decision to behave in a different way. But if you make the decision to behave in that way, then you need to accept the consequences, either or, right? Or if you want to put a boundary in place and then be inflexible in that boundary, you also need to accept the consequences of it.
Yeah, and that's a great point because, I've done it a lot of times where I put my out of office up and then I reply to an email and I suddenly have feelings that I'm mad that a client, how dare they keep replying? And I'm like, but I did that. I put the out of office up, but now I'm answering you. So why wouldn't you do that? But then also I put myself in this weird position of answering an email on Thanksgiving. And somebody's like, why are you doing that? And then I'm like, I have no idea. Because nobody's looking out for this. They're not expecting me to answer. So the boundary thing I think is really important. And Ron and I have talked about that before, because now that we're all so connected, it seems like it's so hard to set them and actually keep to them.
It really is. And some of it as well is fueled by our internal biases around what we think is a good enough excuse. Now, everybody has them. I heard the story about your friend who's like, wait a minute, I don't really think taking a vacation day is like a good enough reason for you to want to have time off.
Yeah.
I bet her tune would have changed if she'd had a complication with her pregnancy and she needed time off for a medical thing, right? People have their own internal biases, but we also have the own that we apply to ourselves. And, you know, one size doesn't fit all for this, but sometimes people genuinely within themselves don't believe that needing to go and get a haircut, it's the only time that they could get one, is as important as little Timmy's concert. And so they'll apologize. And you see a lot of this at work. Lots of people apologize when they need to have time off, and then for some weird reason feel pressured to disclose all of the things that they plan to be doing while they're not doing their job for that small period of time. Any leaders that are listening, this is your sign to remove the need for disclosure. Everybody who works, we have lives as well. And especially if you're a knowledge worker where you have some flexibility and that kind of stuff, leaders should put in place, okay, just one woman's opinion, leaders should put in place that if you need to take time off, that you're a grown-ass human and you can go and take your time, and they should say to you, I don't need to know what you're doing. Take care, assign your responsibilities, see you when you get back. It doesn't matter if they're going to get waxed. It doesn't matter if they're going for brain surgery. Whatever it is, they should be free to do it. Maybe they're just going to stare at the sun. It doesn't matter. They've made a decision and you should support them. And by disclosing it, or by forcing people to disclose it, it creates, intended or not, the ability to be judged for what that time is being used for. But people get sick days. They get vacation days. And if they have flexibility, they should be able to exercise it free from judgment. It doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yeah, and you can see, you know, at least what I'm experiencing, you can see when people have had managers in the past that have kind of demanded or more or like needed to know. I was like, well, why are you out? You can see that the repercussions. There's people all of a sudden now just they over tell you like, you know, oh, well, this is why I'm not, and this is why I'm out. It's like, and I have that same kind of idea and concept, Fallon, you work from there, is I don't need to know. Great, thank you, have a great day. Whatever you're doing, that's your day. By all means, go take it. I don't need to know anymore other than you won't be here. Okay, we got you.
Yeah, and that's I think I'm seeing a lot of organizations in the last like 2 years, I guess, do this. Is I'm happy to see now a lot of organizations who shut down from, let's say, December something through January 2nd, 3rd, whatever it is, because then that does remove the need to feel like you have to put your days in 6 months in advance, just so you're not on Teams or you're not on email, which I'm not gonna lie, I'm totally on both. When I take days off, that's so dumb. And it's just, it kind of removes the stigma of, well, who's going to be around, or kind of drawing straws for who's going to be there. So I'm happy to see that a lot are doing that and just saying our company is completely closed. There is no one around for this amount of time. And everybody, it's just nice for teams because then you don't have one person who's dealing with everything while they're all, like you're saying, Fallon, they're wondering what everybody else is doing and why they're not checking in. So I'm happy to see that. I'm wondering what you both think about what leadership or directors can do to kind of analyze their team or teams, I should say, in a positive way. Like, what can a leader do to kind of be like, okay, Ron, this is your personal situation, Leslie, Fallon, and this is how we're going to even it out, or take away, I guess, those assumptions that, Ron, you may have more time than I do, and just assuming that you would be around for that. So is there a way, do you think, that leadership can kind of, I don't even know if there's a way to analyze that, or if that's the accurate term to use.
I think you kind of said the keywords right there, is take out the assumptions. That's the mistake right there that any of us make, is pretending that we know enough about any other person and what their situation is at any given moment to understand the availability and value of their time. What do you think on that?
I agree. And I think if we step back and apply a bit of a framework that can be used in all sorts of workload situations. I think at its core, what we're talking about is an unbalanced workload, or the perception that there might be an unbalanced workload or some kind of unfair distribution within a team.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing is to step back and go, okay, what actually needs to be done? Because the number of times that people don't actually reassess what the work required is, especially in, say, a holiday situation, is staggering. So start with what actually needs to get done, because then you'll have an understanding of, well, what skills are required, because those two things go hand in hand. So that, then assess the actual workload, what needs to get done within this time frame. Are these critical to the goals and priorities at that time as well? Is it, because if it's just busy work, it can probably wait. Mm-hmm. So is it urgent, important, that kind of stuff? Then have a conversation around each team member's availability. So what are the overall goals of the business? What needs to get done now? Who has the skills to be able to do it? Then who is available to do it? And then within that construct, then have a conversation with all of the people who are in that bunch of people to understand who can be available to assist. And having a big open conversation like that can be good. Now, you will get into situations. This is in an ideal world where it all works and everybody volunteers. But there are situations that happen where a decision must be made and work must be assigned. And so making sure that in those situations that you have a clear framework that's able to be clearly communicated, that's free from bias. And there's a number of different ways to do that as well. You know, some organizations have the person who most recently joined the organization needs to do the tour of duty, you know, that kind of stuff. But clearly setting and clearly communicating that is helpful, because people, if they understand what needs to get done, why they were chosen, and what was applied, will be more receptive to it. And if they understand what's going to happen next time as well, they'll be more receptive to it and as if they were involved in it than somebody who just says, no, I'm sorry, you've got to work the dining room on Christmas Day. Maybe they, you know, if they celebrate Christmas, you got to work the dining room on Christmas Day because you've been rostered on to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that comes along to when we go back to talking about people's feelings about people being off, is I feel like, and I'll speak from my experience, some of those feelings come from somebody taking off and not giving any of their team members any of the information they need. It's happened to me so many times where their clients email me and I have no clue what they're asking for. I don't know their client, so I don't know the tone that this is written in. And immediately my anxiety goes through the roof. And then I do have to text you or try to get a hold of you because I don't know how to take care of this for you. So I'm also wondering if that's where a lot of people's feelings come into, is that this person has stuck me with their work before. They don't give me enough information to do it. So then I spend my valuable time trying to figure out this thing that they didn't take care of before they were gone.
Yeah, that's, in my mind, that's unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, good planning. And I know we talk a lot about project management on this show. And that is project management 101. Mm-hmm. If you are choosing to take time off, the expectation is that you will brief your backfill. There will be a plan for what happens with your work. The train doesn't stop, it just slows down. And so somebody else has to take on the workload. There has to be clear communication, clear expectations. I think that is just table stakes, really. Mm-hmm. And if they're not doing that, that's really letting the team down.
Yeah. And I feel like, and Fallon, I know you do this and Ron does it too. And I do too. I will totally tell somebody they can text me if they literally can't figure something out. That's not going to ruin, and I'll speak for myself, that's not going to ruin my out of office time because you're like, I'm sorry, I just have a quick question. Because then to me, that's something that I might have left out. And that's on me. So I think that's why I still have an issue with those boundaries, because either I forgot something or it's something out of the blue that they asked you for that I didn't prep you for. So I think I'm getting better about my boundaries. I still leave that door open or ajar, if you will, for someone to contact me if I'm out. I
always look at the conversation we're having here, and like the way I'm thinking this is, think about this as when somebody's taking time off, you're acting like an emergency room. So you're triaging. You're not, trying to fix everything. You're triaging, fix whatever you can from when they're gone. And then they're going to go back and see their primary care when they come back. So it's just at that point, unless it's like they're requiring urgent surgery and we're going into the ER and going to the OR, you're just trying to fix it and put some band-aids on it till they get back. And if there's a bigger thing, obviously we dig into it. But I think that's when people go in for coverage rather than having to worry and dig in. Yes, you want to prep them, but you cannot prep for everything. We can't foresee every single possibility that might happen. So our goal when we're doing coverage is triage. That's it. We're triaging, trying to keep everybody working and happy. And then when the regular person comes back, they can help fix or mend whatever else is making it a health situation.
Yeah. And I think if you have, and I hope everybody does, healthy relationship with your clients, also prep them too. I mean, I've had a few in the past where I'm like, please don't ask that person for some random report and say that you need it that same day if you know that I'm gone and they don't know how to pull that or pull those metrics together. That also has happened to me in the past. Everything today has happened to me at some point. So it's just because if that's not something that person normally does, I'm going to kind of try to prep my clients to on if it's something like a report that can wait, please don't ask them for it. Because then they're going to stress out. They're going to stress me out. And then I'm going to go pull it while I'm supposed to be gone.
And I think that goes back to the whole thing that we always talk about here. It's communication. It's always about the communication of making sure. And I think that's a great point that you make there, Leslie, is to communicate with customers and clients when you are planning to be out. It doesn't have to be a long explanation. Just, I'm going to be out of the office from these dates. I want to let you know, here's the person you'll be covering. Introduce those folks so they're connected at that point. You've had that conversation, so there's no surprise anywhere around, and they know that, hey, I'm working with someone who's covering, so they don't necessarily know my entire business story with the organization. So the better we communicate, the better results we get all around.
Yeah. The worst thing you can get is a forward that says, I didn't know Ron was out of the office. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, that is definitely a party foul in my mind. If somebody didn't know, like, especially the client didn't know you were going, or nobody knew you were going, and the first we hear of it is an out of office. And I think that can happen as contractors. I know that's something else that we talk about on this show a lot is if you're an independent contractor, maybe working with a variety of clients, communicating early and often, understanding how they can contact you or if they can contact you. And going back to the concept of having a backfill as well, there's a level of trust and support that you need to give that person as well. If you hand them the baby, you need to also empower them to make decisions on your behalf, because otherwise you will be making a rod for your own back. If that person doesn't feel empowered, you're in for a very disrupted vacation because they won't be able to go to the bathroom without your permission. Can I move this from here to there? Can I do this? Can I do that? Empower that person. And then even if they do something that maybe isn't 100% the way that you would do it, as long as it's not a massive clangor, support that person. Even if you have to sort of gently walk it back or do some interesting things when you get back in the office, it's really important that you do support that person, because then next time they'll do a better job and a better job and a better job. Otherwise, there's no point. You may as well just make yourself available for the whole time, especially if you're going to punish the person who's trying to do their best, because they'll just get frustrated. They'll be like, okay, well then why'd I even bother offering to help you out if you're not going to trust me or let me do my job?
Oh yeah. There's been people on my list before that I was like, I'm never being your backup again. But don't worry, Ron, you aren't one of them. But that makes them feel that way too. Because I would never, I don't work with them anymore, but there's certain people, no way would I ever be their backup again, because they just didn't prep anything. And, when they came back, we're like, well, you should have answered like this. Well, you weren't here. So it's like you're saying, Fallon, let them do it their way. As long as they cover it, it doesn't matter if they didn't use the same language that you would have. As long as it was covered, it's complete. Take it.
Absolutely. And I think this is another case for as well, something that I know the three of us do when we work together is we use real-time cloud collaboration tools. We're not trying to manage a project with a bunch of sticky notes in our respective offices. We use a lot of tools, which I'm not going to inadvertently promote on the show, even though I love them. But we do that. All of the notes are kept in a central location. Everybody is copied on all of the communications. I think that's a critical part of setting yourself up for success. There are lots of people who say, I can never take a holiday, I can never do anything, but they fail to plan. And if you don't plan and you don't have standard operating procedures, if you don't have clear roles and responsibilities, if you don't have clear expectations, those things are project management 101, teamwork 101. Without any of that sort of stuff, you won't be successful when you try to do advanced dance moves like the lead project manager to go to Europe for 2 weeks in the middle of a project deliverable. You need to focus on those things right up front.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. Well, we have actually come to the end of our time. This has been a great conversation. Fallon, thank you so much for joining us. This has been great. Hopefully you'll come back and join us again on the program.
Thank you. I would love that.
Leslie, thank you as always. And the final update before we go, just on our charity for the Children's Fund, we are up to $333. So let's keep those going. All you have to do is download or listen to the program. The more you do that, the more that number gets to go up, and we'll be giving that final donation in the first week or two of January. All right. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you in the next episode.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.